Also, oh, I forgot what I was going to talk about. The pro race. Mm, uh, 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 uh. Hey race fan, Brian Davis races and you can too. Listen, today we're going to break down a little bit of a difference between the pro race and the masters race at a recent race I did in LaCrosse, Wisconsin. So I did the masters 1, 2, 3 category, and then I got an hour break for the women's race, and then I ended up doing the pro race and hung on for at least a few minutes. So what I did is I took turns, turn number 1, laps number 2, 3, 4, 5 between the pro race and the master race, and compared those side by side to give you some idea of what the differences are. Anyway, after that, I will break down the Masters 1, 2, 3 race in more detail. So if you would like to stick around for that, you are welcome to. It's all smashed into one really long looking video, but there's 2 parts to it. So I just want to thank you for tuning into the channel, and if you do get a chance, please subscribe to the channel. It really means a lot to me to see the subscriptions, or leave a comment and let me know that you're getting some value out of the channel. It means a ton to me because they take a lot of work to put these together, and I'm actually not very good at editing, so it takes me extra long. In any event, the goal on this channel is to grow our sport, grow our knowledge, and grow our fitness, and I hope that I deliver that to you today. If so, please do consider subscribing and hit that little bell icon to be notified when I put out new content. Thanks for watching Brian Davis Races, and you can too. Okay friends, this is the Pro Race Masters race again, comparing laps 2, 3, 4, 5. I was trying to be careful to start them each on the start line, and I think I did a pretty good job. You can see the Pro Race is going to hit this building on the right before the Masters race almost every single time. The Pro Race has a little bit of moisture on the ground, but overall the course is dry. It was really kind of a non-factor. So you can see the sprinting out of each corner. My interpretation of racing the race was the Masters were a little bit more appropriate to speed to take the turn smoothly, and the pro race was sprint, 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 slam your brakes, sprint, 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 and that power output really cost me a lot in my legs. So I only lasted in the pro race for 10 minutes or so. So yeah, the Masters race, obviously things are different between these two categories. The number of racers, the time of day, everything's different. I get that. But the power output and the speeds, I think, are comparable and paints a little bit of picture. I'm curious, what do you notice when you're watching this video? You can see the power outputs coming out of the pro race. They're not wildly dissimilar on the exit. But they do seem to carry a lot more power going into the turn, and the Masters race definitely has a lot of coasting. And if I had the audio up, you could hear my brakes coming on in the pro race every single time. And the Masters, I think only one of these laps I hit the brakes. Everything else was pretty smooth. So here you'll see a comparison. The Masters race averaged 27.2 miles per hour for that section only, and 240 watts, and the pro race again for that section only 28 miles an hour and 276 watts. That's a pretty big jump. Alright, now let's break down the entire Masters 1, 2, 3 race. Alright friends, well thanks for watching Brian Davis Races, and you can too. This is the Masters 1, 2, 3 race in LaCrosse, Wisconsin. This race is part of an omnium, and an omnium, if you don't know that, is a multiple stage race. I've only known them to be 3 stages, so my interpretation of an omnium is some sort of time trial, some sort of road race, and some sort of crit race. And the LaCrosse omnium certainly is that. So on Friday night when we arrived at this race, there's an uphill time trial that lasts 10 minutes. It was brutal, crushed my soul and my legs. And then, it was 10 minutes for me. It was 8 minutes for the winner. It's a pretty big difference between those two times on a short race. And then on Saturday we had a beautiful rolling hills course in LaCrosse, gorgeous part of the state. I have another video about the whole Omnium experience. This video is just going to be breaking down the Masters 1-2-3 race. So I will not talk the whole time, just so you know. My theory on these races are a couple of things. One, it's my channel, I do what I want, and I like long voiceover videos of people racing bikes because I like to watch them when I am on my trainer pounding out miles. So yeah, if you don't like it, I would encourage you to start your own YouTube channel and do something different. But this one's mine, and this is what I like to do. So neener. And hopefully you get some value out of it too. So the goal in this these voiceover videos is to give you more reps, more at-bats, more experience without having to risk your skin and wear out your legs. So that is why I really enjoy these videos. I think the first ones that I saw were from Cycling Maven in Australia, and I just fell in love with the concept of it. So I've been doing them for a number of years, and some are good, some are bad, but yeah, that's what I do. So again, the LaCrosse, you can see the, let's get back to the race. Okay, so you can see the course in the upper right hand corner, and on the left hand side you'll see my heart rate, which is traditionally lower than every other human being that I race bikes with. My watts in the middle, and then the miles per hour to the right. Yeah, the duration is a little bit off, and then the mileage should be pretty spot on. If you're curious, I have a front camera that is the Garmin Verb camera, and it's the Verb Ultra 30, I believe. So that can support 4K, although the battery life does not last long enough to do a whole race. This camera does have some image stabilization. It is not nearly as good as my new GoPro 7, but this camera has a lot of advantages when you're racing your bike. Number one, it's a hard switch, so you turn it on or turn it off with a switch. That makes it a lot easier to know if it's running or know if it's not. And the GoPro's series of beeps is cool when you start it and cool when you stop it, but if you forget what's happening during the race or during your event or whatever you're doing, you really have no way to check if it's on or off. So it's kind of a super annoying setup. I wish there was some way to more clearly indicate if it's on or off. So anyway, this race, I struggled to get my legs underneath me in the first half of the race, that's for sure. So earlier in this video you saw me float myself up to the top. So I'll just give you a quick tip on that. A lot of people start a race in a way too big of a gear, and I guess I got this tip years and years ago, and I absolutely fell in love with it. It's from a teammate of mine, John Robertson, and the tip is to start in your small ring up front, and then you can blast off the front of the group, and you can get yourself an extra 1 second gap, and then you can worry about shifting into the big ring. It just makes life much easier to get out in front of the group, especially on these smaller regional races where getting to the front of the line is definitely not a big deal. But this summer I'll do Tour of America's Dairyland, and that race is usually much more crowded, so where you pre-stage can be fairly important. So if you're up near the front of the pack, getting a good launch is a really nice way to start the race. It's a lot less stressful, a lot less wattage to be at the front third of the race than it is to be in the middle or the back. Now, a lot of people that are just starting out racing feel like they really want to be in the back because they don't want to hurt somebody else, which is cool. If that's where you want to start, no problem. But as you get a little more comfortable realizing that you're not going to hurt anyone, then I would encourage you to try to filter yourself up as quickly before the race as possible, and then when you launch, to be in that small ring and worry about shifting later. Especially if you have electronic shifting, it's just so spot on to get into the big ring. It's just a non-issue, so you may as well do that. Yeah, so I think this race had like 30 people in our race, and this is a couple more hours away from where I normally race. This is on the western side of Wisconsin, and I usually race in Milwaukee, which is on the southeast side of Wisconsin. And LaCrosse pulls in a number of racers from Minnesota and some around the Midwest in general. Certainly plenty of Wisconsin racers were there, but the LaCrosse Omnium is just a really well-run event, and this is actually the first time that I've done it. I have wanted to do it forever and ever, but I just it's really hard for me to justify being away for multiple days. But this year I forced the issue, I guess, a bit, and my family was gracious enough to comply with my desire to go play bike racer for a weekend. So had a lot of fun hanging out with the guys. We ended up having I think 9 people on our team were at the race, and then that allowed us to get a couple of Airbnbs to stay in LaCrosse, and we actually took the team truck over to LaCrosse, which really de-stressed the whole event. Being able to put 4, 5, 6 people into that one vehicle, it's a lot less to worry about for parking and logistics and herding the cats to get everybody to get together to go out to eat or whatever the case was. So it's a great way to run a race. So as far as this race goes, you'll still see at the back of the pack here. Now, a couple of the dynamics of this race. This race was filled with super talented racers. There was probably 6 people in this race that could power away from most any group in the state of Wisconsin a lot of the time, or whenever they felt like it. So it was kind of an interesting race to be a part of, because you think, well, all these guys love to break away. They'll certainly work together in a breakaway, but I don't think they imagine they're going to get all 6 of these powerhouses, because they're all in different teams too. I don't think all these guys are going to be jumping up the road together just that easily, right? And they didn't. So it was a lot of checking each other and chasing each other and pulling each other back. And so the first bunch of laps here was an awful battle for these guys trying to get separation, and it just was not going to happen. The group or the other racers that want to break away were just not allowing any sort of leash for groups to go up the road. So a couple of the lessons to take away from this race for me was, so my role on the team in this race, we have actually 3 other people doing this race. One of the guys was it's early on in his crit racing career, so he was hanging at the back more or less. He came up and did a couple of heroic efforts at the front to yank the whole crew around and shut down a breakaway, but for the most part I think he's just getting his legs under him for crit racing, which is great. He's a wonderful person. But the other 2 guys have plenty of experience crit racing, and the role of my position on the team is to maybe be the last ditch effort for a sprint. Not sure that we spent a whole lot of time discussing that before the race, because everyone just assumed there was going to be a big breakaway here. And if there was, then the person who's getting his, John is his name, the person getting his crit legs under him is strong enough to pull back that breakaway or join that breakaway, and then he certainly would have been comfortable with a group of 4. But it never really came to fruition, other than one person made it come to fruition. So about halfway through this race, the National Crit Racing Champion, Jaden Yeager, or former, not sure if he's still, I don't know what year he won. My years get all mixed together. But he just took off on the group and soloed to a victory, which is just incredible. But he timed it really, really well. So after all these attacks and all this chasing, he was able to break the back of the group and find his way to freedom. So this was probably the fastest Masters race I have ever participated in. It was definitely the most fun. It was really consistent speed. We carried a ton of momentum through these turns. It was just a blast to race. The course was great. It's got just enough character to make it interesting, but it's not the star of the show, that's for sure. It's definitely the bike racing that is the star of the show. So for my money, I like a course that's pretty straightforward, so the racers can do their thing, because I think that's plenty of entertainment and offers plenty of danger without having to mix in insane course features. But that's just me. So let's just go through each turn here. So that's the start finish, and turn 1, if you watch the beginning of this video where I compared the pro race versus the master race, the master race, you can see us coasting, pretty soft pedal all the way back there. We're carrying a lot of speed through the turn, 28 miles an hour, and then on the gas, right? Yeah. So it didn't necessarily happen in the pro race. So then turn 2, pretty straightforward turn here. I chopped a wheel through that turn once or twice, just because at the end of the race, these turns have a way of taking on an entirely different life than they did for the first 45 minutes of the race. The last 3 laps, all these turns change completely because you're carrying so much more speed. So again, the channel, I'm really trying to get new people interested in racing, and I hope I'm entertaining the people that have raced for years and years as well. But the goal of the channel is to grow the sport. So if you are thinking about racing, just be aware of that when you start cutting these turns in the first few laps, everything will feel pretty hunky-dory, and then over time the pace makes these turns change. So what I mean by that is that there becomes only really 1 or 2 lines to get through a turn instead of 4 or 5 lines in some cases, and it definitely changes your ability to position yourself changes completely, because there's only 1 or 2 ways through a turn. So if you're not in the front of the pack, it's very difficult for you to find a smooth way through some of these turns. So you can see there was an attack off the front there, and immediately shut down. Pretty consistent throughout the day. I was super excited about this race just to watch these fireworks, but again, I got so excited watching the fireworks that I didn't think about doing my job. And my job was to stay home, conserve energy, and maybe be that last-ditch sprint option for the team. And we had a great shot. You'll see at the end of this. I mean, really, that plan did come together extremely well, but my ability to do my job just wasn't there. So it was kind of a complete failure on my end to do what I'm supposed to do. But that's bike racing. So this is turn 3, pretty smooth here. No issues on turn 3 the whole day. There's the little cutout was interesting. So turn 4 had the most character. There's a little cobblestone sidewalk there, which is more of a bump. And then right after that cobblestone is a little bit of a lump in the pavement, which kind of launches your bike. Not in the air, but it gives you definitely a rise and a fall really quickly. And then as you cut through turn 4, we'll be back around there in 1 second. Just hold your horses. You will see in turn 4 that there's a manhole cover that's right at the apex of the turn, and there is also a crack at the joint of these pavement slabs. So it's the corner of 2 slabs has deteriorated, so it's creating kind of a pothole effect between the slabs, and that is also right in the apex of turn number 4. So maybe next year I would suggest just a hot little dose of asphalt in that crack. But overall, like I said, very safe race, no issues. So you can see this race still just pounding speed. Everyone is single file, 30 miles an hour down the backstretch. My heart rate for me, 158, it's pretty warmed up. I top out at 165. I literally cannot. That's anaerobic for me. If I hit 165 or 166, I'm toast. So 158 is definitely the top of my threshold capability. Sad but true. It actually changed for me quite a bit a few years ago when I had a thyroid issue. My heart rate just was never the same since it's dropped. It doesn't seem to affect my power. It's just the number is lower than it used to be. So no big deal. Another thing I didn't show in that comparison video was in the pro race coming out of turn 4 and getting launched into this straightaway. In the pro race, that was just an all-out scramble to catch the wheel in front of you. And in the Masters race, there was definitely elements of that, but nothing quite as fierce as what we were seeing or as what I was experiencing in the pro race. So, yeah. So there you go. So racing with some folks we don't usually get to race with. This donkey label kit right there in front of me. There was a number of those guys. Super strong team, good tactics, fun to race with, nice and safe riding, super fit guys. So that was it was neat to kind of mix up with a whole crew of people from a different part of the. I think they're from Minnesota. I'm pretty sure. Yeah. So for those of you new to bike racing, earlier when you saw the field was strung out on this backstretch and we were going 30 miles an hour on the last lap. Now you can see we're going 26, 27, and you can see 3, 4, 5 riders wide. That's the indication that things have slowed down. So the reason that's important to know is that if you do get dropped off the back of your first race, keep chasing, because if you see the group mushroom out like that, that's what it's referred to as. If you see the group expand, that means they've all slowed down considerably, and that would be the opportunity for you to keep your nose into the wind and try to claw that group back if you did get dropped in those first couple laps. So I will say this, racing is a totally different sport than group riding, and I definitely see people that show up to a race and really have a group ride mentality, which is it's nice of them to want to do work, but it's poor racing tactics. The thing with racing is whoever does the least amount of work up until the last finish is probably going to win the race. So it's not so much about what your physical capability is. A lot of the times it's what your ability to be efficient. That's what racing comes down to. Are you more efficient than the other folks around you, or are you stronger? I mean, certainly you can win a race if you're just flat out stronger than everyone else, but there's been plenty of times where probably not as in shape of riders have been able to walk away with the race because they were significantly more efficient, and really that efficiency comes with experience. So being comfortable staying on the wheel ahead of you, certainly racing with some of these guys more than once in your life is helpful as well. But for the most part, once you get up to the Masters 1, 2, 3 category, everybody's pretty good at handling their bikes, for the most part. So the week after this race, I did another race, and I'll do a breakdown of that one. And there was, well, we'll talk about that in the future video. But there was somebody there who wasn't quite as smooth as some of the other kids. Clearly a mountain biker. I'm sure he's a wonderful person. But I'm desperate to buy that person or give him a set of rollers to straighten him right out. So he's got the fitness, but the bike handling was a little suspect, which definitely gets your attention when you're racing bikes, because other people's ability to handle their bikes directly affects your safety. And so sometimes you'll hear people talk about road cycling as snobby or arrogant or stuck up or exclusive or something along those lines. And you know, that you certainly get that vibe, and it's kind of a love it or leave it thing. A lot of people enjoy that. I wouldn't say enjoy, but they're challenged by it, and I think that's what draws a lot of people into the sport. And there's the reason that it gets that vibe is because if people are doing dangerous things around us, their behavior affects my safety. So if I'm playing softball on a Thursday night beer league and somebody is an idiot and drinks too much and acts poorly, it's very unlikely that that's going to cause me any pain in my life. But in bike racing, that's not the case. So if someone is acting poorly in a bike race and they do crazy, abrupt, strange things, it definitely affects everyone else. So when we see that type of behavior, a lot of people can't help but to call it out and try to correct it. And sometimes that correcting procedure is not done as politically pleasantly as possible. That was a lot of P's. But that's the reality of it. So I like that about road racing. I don't mind it. I found it challenging to me when I started to get the hang of it, to get better at it, to try to hang with the fast group rides, and that's what hooked me on the sport. Because once I finally got there, I understood the whole arc, and to me, that has proven to be a life-changing activity. So, yeah, race bikes. All right, I'm going to be quiet for a minute. Just take a drink. You guys can just watch. All right, there I took a lap off. That felt nice. I'm refreshed. So here we are on the backstretch going 30 miles an hour still. So that was there was a teammate of mine, and he went and shut down a little bit of a break before, and that's him coming to the back of the group, and he will catch back on for sure. And job done. So good for John. Right. So there's not a whole lot to report here in terms of changes. The one thing that is going to be coming up here shortly is that after the breakaway specialists in this race realized that it's probably not going to work out to get a group up the road, I think everyone is hope spring refreshed. So I think this is where Jaden takes off. There he is up the road. There's a single rider up the road, and everyone else is kind of thrown in the towel. I think that was then. Nope, there's Jaden. Sorry. There's Jaden to my left, 2 or 3 riders up, so that was not him. So still obviously getting plenty of attacks halfway through the race. I started to feel a little bit better about my lot in life. About halfway through this race, I realized I still like racing bikes. I still know how to do it. And pretty soon here, I think I'm going to start moving my way up. And I don't know that I necessarily did anything to strategically want to do that or need to do that. I just think everyone else sort of soft pedaled a little bit more. It's probably another few minutes before I move myself up. But I think the group soft pedaled a bit, and then that gave me a lot more opportunity to be able to move up. And generally speaking, I am significantly more comfortable being toward the front of the race in the top 3, 4, 5 riders. That just tends to be where I hang out. And if I can't do that in a race, it's frustrating to me because I feel a lot safer up toward the front, and I feel a lot more responsive to movement up in front. So if there's a little move off the front, I can just grab it. I'm not skilled, or do I often desire to establish my own break by any means. I've actually only ever done a solo break once, and other than that, I've never been in a break for an extended amount of time that went up the road. So I think the longest time I was ever in a break was like maybe 4 or 5 laps in a crit race in Toad a few years ago, I feel like. I can't even remember. That's definitely not my strong suit. My strong suit is sprinting, and I don't know, I used to be a little bit better at it than I am now, maybe. But I have some strategies coming soon to help me get back on top with sprinting. So the biggest thing for me was I would struggle to be relevant at the end of a race because the training, the base training, the specificity of training just wasn't ever there in the past. I've had coaches in the past, and those years that I had coaches, I was definitely prepared, and I could extend my ability to go hard longer to be relevant in a race. But for a number of years, I have not had a coach. And so last year, if you've been watching the channel, you've heard this story before, but last year what I did is I went through the Zwift booster program, and then after that I just thought, well, I'll just ride a lot, and I'll do the best I can. And that didn't work out too well. My daughter had an illness, and we spent some time in the hospital last summer, so I didn't get to race nearly as much as I wanted to. She's okay, thanks for asking. But it was pretty stressful. It was very stressful, and definitely had an effect. So this year I really wanted to figure out a way to come back into racing and try to perform at a much higher level than I have in the past few years. So what I did this year that's different is that I went through the Trainer Road program. I did the base, the build, and at the moment I'm recording this, I'm about halfway through the specialty phase as well. So what I've noticed is each of the categories is very, very different. So the base phase is just long, monotonous time spent that's just below the point where you can't do it. The build phase is pretty similar, except a little bit harder. And the build phase will go over FTP on occasion, and then the specialty phase is pretty much just either all on or all off. There's not much in the middle. It's either extremely high wattage or extremely low wattage, and I seem to be doing the best with that type of workout in terms of completing it as planned. I seem to struggle the most with the build phase, where it was a lot of FTP or threshold riding, and then a couple of peaks and valleys, but a longer recovery. I shouldn't say recovery, but you'd go from a high effort to back down to a threshold effort, and that is more difficult for me to moderate with my body for whatever reason. But what I've noticed with Trainer Road is it's given me a lot more firepower to compete. So you can see this is my teammate off to the right ahead of me. He almost lost his wheel on that turn. He hit that broken pavement, and here I thought that he had flatted, and that was unfortunate, but turns out he did not. So, all right, now you can see I'm moving up a little closer to, well, I'm actually at the front of the race. So these are 1, 2, 3 of the 6, maybe 4 of the 6 guys that could leave whenever they want are up in this top echelon of riders, and then there's me. One of these kids is not like the other. So this is probably a good example of staying home, and this is not an area that I really should have been jumping up into a group like this. I mean, it's probably, if I were racing by myself, it would be good to be able to respond to an attack, but I wasn't. So Andy there is a teammate off on the left, and he's significantly stronger at me when it comes to putting out just long, sustained, hard efforts. So he could join one of these breaks and do great. So that was certainly higher on the list of priorities, is to see if we could get Andy or the teammate that went off before John into one of these moves. That would have been amazing. And if that didn't work out, then I guess I was the plan C sprinter, which I was comfortable with, but I still screwed that up. So in any event, the eventual race winner is off to the right here. He's got that orange jersey ahead of me and orange shoes, pedaling directly ahead of me. That's Jaden. We'll see, now that I'm watching this from start to finish, I'm curious when he actually flies the coop. So let's see, we're 32 minutes into the race, roughly. That duration, again, is not quite correct. So maybe it's closer to 28 minutes. So this is a good place. Again, another good example of where I should not be. Ripping a turn and then blasting out to well over 1,000. Yeah, that's a long time at 1,000 watts. And what am I going to get out of that? Right? Like, even if that did turn to a breakaway and I was able to get sucked along with it, I don't think I can hang with those guys. And maybe that's a mental defect on my end to be thinking that way, but it's just not how my body works. I wish it was, because that's really a much more successful strategy in Masters 1, 2, 3 racing, is the ability to put out a crap ton of power for a long time and get in a breakaway, but that's just not how it works. Well, there is a rider up the road who we're chasing. You can see the pace car is well ahead of us, so there's definitely a rider between this group and the pace car. I don't know who that was, but I think we're going to find out. So I think our little group here splits apart. Shortly, we're going to give up, look at each other for a minute, if I remember correctly. I could be wrong. But I have no doubt that the rest of the entire race is glued firmly to my wheel. Okay, there it is. So there's the looking. That might be Jaden up the road. This might be where he pushed the issue. No, that can't be. Nope, definitely not. That's Jaden. Alright. So that person's definitely going to come back. I'm curious to see if that's Jaden's teammate on Meteor, if he pulls him back. No, not his teammate. And if he was going to do that, that would be an interesting moment, but he did not do that. Oh, maybe this is the moment when Jaden takes off. And maybe I'm the reason, because I'm screwing up the... Oh, no. There they go. Everybody got the message. There goes Jaden, and boom, boom. I mean, that is a lot of power going up the road to catch Jaden. Isn't that crazy? That's crazy. That's just kind of fun to watch. So all those people that just passed me, all of them wanted to be in the break, and all of them could be in the break. But there's just so many of these guys that want to be in the break that it ends up being a lot easier for a guy like me to hang on to a string of wheels to be able to just coast along and let them close it down. So, yeah, sort of an interesting moment. I'm curious if it's got to be coming up here pretty soon when when the solo breakaway does get established. I'm trying to see through these legs. It's hard to see what's happening. So there's an interesting strategy, is to sort of let these moves move up a little bit and move yourself back, and let somebody else take up the work. So especially if you're a more well-known, seasoned rider, you can make a motion like that and people will probably respond and close it up for you. So yeah, that happens. So I think we're all going to be back together. We'll see if we get back up to 30 miles an hour in a straight line again. Yep, we sure are. Such a fast race. Oh my gosh. Had a blast. Had a blast. So you saw earlier the pro race was at 28 miles an hour average. I'm not sure, of course, where it finished. I only raced a few more minutes past that little section that I cut out. That was at the beginning of the race. I'm not sure what the average mile per hour was for the master race versus the pro race. The pro race did have eventually a breakaway of 4 riders, I believe, that stuck, and that was fun to watch from the sidelines. So yeah, I don't know if they made the 28 mile an hour average or not. Well, all right, we're all still together. I still don't think Jaden is up the road, but he may very well be up the road. I don't see him anymore, and he was up there. We'll just keep watching, see what happens. Mostly just keep your eye on the pace car. If the pace car gets away, and you can't see it anymore, that definitely means there's somebody in between us. And that certainly looks to be the case. Yeah, the pace car is well up the road, and I think I just saw Jaden off to the right. So now that's a significant gap, and you can see that there's not a lot of people willing to take up that chase. So that person on the front right now is Jaden's teammate, and so you can see him trying to soften us up a little bit and slowly pull that power level back, make us all feel really comfortable because it's been a really fast, hard race so far. Not everyone knows that Jaden is up the road, of course, because you have race brain. And so even these top 3-4 guys, I would say I'm even the fourth wheel. If you were to ask me right at that moment if I knew there was a rider up the road, I don't think I knew that. So here's the risk, right? Like this rider ahead of me, Robert, he's willing to put in some work, hoping that the group will pull through. And unfortunately, he's going to turn around and only see me, and I am not going to pull through. Yeah, so I feel like I had a lot of responsibility for this move going up the road. Yeah. So yeah, I should not be up here. I should not be second wheel in a race like this. Given my role, that's all I'm saying. Is given my role, I should have been in the back, hoping for a sprint finish and saving as much energy as possible. Yeah, I totally screwed it up. So. Yep. Jaden has already turned the corner now, and then his teammate comes back to the front to play possum. And he's not in our way, just to be clear. This strategy is called blocking, but he's not physically blocking anyone from racing ahead of him or anything like that. It's just about disrupting the rhythm of the chase group. So a well-oiled chase group would be doing pace line or rotating pace line to try to pull a rider back. But if you have a teammate in the middle of that pace line that might slow down or speed up, that creates problems. So I believe that's Warwick, a racer from New Zealand that comes to the United States for a couple of months per year. So it's good to have him back. And what he did is he let a little gap open. So I think he trusts his teammate Jaden quite a bit. And even if Jaden were to get some help from a couple people going up the road, that wouldn't be the end of the world for a solo breakaway either. So Warwick's setting up little groups to go up the road, which you can't lose in that strategy, because if a group does go up the road and catch your rider who's going solo, that's definitely a good thing, depending on the team makeup of who goes to get them. And if that doesn't happen, riders from behind you are going to have to come around you to close that gap, and you're going to wear them out as well. So it's a great position to be in, a teammate with a strong rider, a strong teammate up the road. The other teammates that are in the group, their day just got a lot easier. If you can get a rider in the group, everything changes for you. So yeah, I feel like I have no idea right now that there's a rider up the road. That's just my guess. I don't know. Hard to say. I cannot remember. So this voiceover I'm doing about 2 weeks after the race, and normally I like to do them right away, but every once in a while it's not so bad to experiment with doing it much later, because then the race is a bit of a surprise to me as I'm doing the voiceover. Because my memory is terrible. It's really bad for me to remember what happened in XYZ corner or XYZ race or XYZ moment. I cannot remember any of these things. Other guys that I talk to, that I race with, they remember all kinds of details from the race, but I do not. So when I do these voiceovers a week or two later, it is like a brand new day in the fishbowl. I have no idea what's going to happen, other than I know I did not do my best. So there's our teammate that can go into a breakaway, John, and you can see when he goes up the road, then I think, not that those other two folks didn't bring some thunder as well, but John definitely gets some people's attention. Not everyone knows John just yet, but they all will shortly. So that could shut down for whatever type of move that was, and that was pretty much the rest of the day. So I think groups would try for another 10 or 15 minutes to do something, but yeah, no one was gonna pull Jaden back. He's just too far ahead of us now. He's put in really long, consistent watts to move himself up the road, and yeah, you're not going to see him again, generally speaking. I'm going to take another drink and have a break. All right, I'm going to pop back in here. So these three riders ahead of me are quite strong, and they can go up the road. I don't think they would get Jaden, but they could certainly be able to contend for second, third, fourth. And again, this is really not my role to be up here, but the race had slowed down so much because a number of riders had thrown in I wouldn't say they'd thrown in the towel for sure, but that's definitely, their tactics have changed once Jaden has established a significant break. Jaden's really well known, really well respected in the Midwest, so you kind of have a good feeling of what's going to happen once he's got some room to run. Now, what's funny in my brain is I'm thinking, oh, I'm finally racing well. My legs feel good. I'm going to hang out at the front now. The race is... I guess I didn't realize that the race had slowed down this much. Yeah. So it wasn't me that was feeling good. It was everyone else that had slowed down. Oh, that's rough. But that's the reality. So I think at this point the concept would be, can somebody else establish a 3-4 man break to go up the road? Yeah. I don't think no one does that, but doesn't stop him from trying, right? So you can see one guy goes, there's his teammate is off to my left, he's not going to pull, so Robert goes, Anderson goes, and I'm going to tuck in behind them and hope for the best. And yeah, doesn't take long, and we pull back the donkey label rider, and we'll be setting ourselves up for another attack. I'm curious if the other donkey label rider will try to fly the coop now that we've brought his buddy back. We'll see. That would be that'd be a good tactic. The 1-2 punch, so to speak. And then I think anyone who'd be leaving at this point would be hoping that another rider or a couple of riders would join them in this, become the chase group, and then the peloton would be behind the chase group. So you'd have the leader or leaders, a chase group, and then the peloton would be behind that, just for verbiage sake. I don't necessarily recall any preems. I think there were, though. I think there were some preems. So just to be clear, because I know there's a lot of terminology in cycling, and you'll hear a word like preem, and pronounced, but it's spelled like prime, Prime, but it's pronounced preem, at least as I know it. So what that is an in-race prize, whether that's money, a loaf of bread, a pair of socks, I don't know, a couple $100 sometimes, depending on the size of the race. So these preems can be huge, or they can be insignificant. So what they are is just the ability for the organizer to increase the racing action. So if there's a move like this up the front where Jaden and everybody sort of falls asleep because okay, Jaden's going to win the race. Well, if they interject some of these mini sprints into the race, everyone else can watch us sprint for a pair of socks or whatever they're giving away, and that can be a little more entertaining for the crowd. So that's the point of a preem. That is how you pronounce a preem, and that is also how you spell the word preem when it is related to bike racing. So there you go. Now you know. I should find that NBC graphic. The more you know. Doo-doo-doo. Yeah, you're welcome. Alright, this race should be wrapping up fairly soon, and then you're going to be able to see kind of how I messed up this last lap or two. So yeah, I think we're down to our last 2 laps, if I had to guess. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's what's going to happen. So here I am racing at the front, which feels comfortable, and then boom, just a lightning strike of power coming from the back of the field. And for the record, that is a great way to attack. So you don't want to be in the top 5 riders when you put in an attack. You'd ideally be coming from 10 or 15 back, scooting up the side of the group, and then really digging in and blasting off the front. So my 2 teammates ahead of me, right? This is perfect. Andy Webb, John Robertson ahead of me. And if the plan is to help last-ditch effort sprinting, we're in a good position here. So, but you'll see that I mess it up. So here's John and Andy. I'm comfortable with where we're at positioning-wise. We have maybe 1 or 2 or 3 more riders ahead of us than would be ideal, but we're all gassed, so it's not like we have a whole lot of control over that at this point. And I don't know how many laps are left, so that is hard for me to comment on without knowing that. This is definitely not the last lap. So when you get into these final 2 laps, that's when the corners change, right? So we're taking much faster lines, or we will be shortly. People will be taking chances, blasting off the front, and that just totally changes the way the course works. So you can see I had a little strategic error there. I let this rider get between me and Andy because I wasn't sucked up to Andy's wheel close enough, and I wasn't aggressive enough at making sure that I kept my spot. And then there I let a couple people go through, and I'm quite sure that I let a few more people go through, and that's the mistake, really. That's the positioning mistake, is letting at least those two riders get ahead of me, and I think we're going to see a few more pop ahead of me. Yep. Yeah, you can't do that in the last 2 laps. I cannot let people just scoot right through. And I'm out of the draft, hanging out on the left-hand side, so that's costing me a lot of watts. So finally got a draft. That part's good. But yeah, maybe I could have been aggressive there and tried to split those two riders, but I don't know what good that would have done, to be honest with you. So the hard part, when it ramps up to this speed, it's just really hard to move up once it's already going 28 miles an hour. It's really, really difficult to move up. If it's going 30 miles an hour, it's even more difficult to move up. So this is definitely the last lap. So there's John. He's ahead of me. I think Andy's going to come by. I do grab Andy's wheel, but then I just don't have the power to do anything with it. I believe Andy will be coming. Yep. And that was a nice move. And this is really good timing. We were able to get Robert's wheel ahead of Andy. We're going into the last 2 turns. We're a little too far back, but that's okay. It is what it is. And Andy's doing a great job. I don't think John's going to be able to maintain the speed we need here, and I think Andy knows that, so not the end of the world, but right there, boop, I lost Andy, and I lost my chance at within the top 10. I think I finished 10th is what I did, so which is good. I'm happy with that, no problem. But I certainly wish I could have grabbed Andy's wheel. All right, thanks for watching. Have a good day.